Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity and Akton Tamko's discussion video for Game of Thrones Season 5, Episode 10, Mother's Mercy, which is the finale. So this is a book spoiler discussion video. I know the show is pretty much caught up with the books at this point. However, there's still a few bits and bobs, a few things here and there that could still yet spoil you if you haven't read the book. So if you really don't want to know any spoilers, then this wouldn't be the video for you. So of course, with me to discuss Game of Thrones is Akton Tamko. If you want to say hello.
Hello, and I just want to say thanks to Mark for posting this video on his channel this week. It's supposed to be my turn because we've been taking turns every other video, and I kind of want to clarify because I said in my video that Mark is hosting it because I'm going on vacation, and I think a couple people took that as we're not doing our discussion video right away because I'm going on vacation. But what it actually meant was that there's a lot of time and effort that goes to editing the audio and then putting pictures to it and all that, and I didn't want to spend like the entire day doing that because I have other plans. And furthermore, especially with our Q&A in the comments, we don't like to post our Q&A comments. We like to save that for the video that we're doing next week. So we have to have it set on, I approve any comments that come in. So if I'm away for 5 days, then that means there would be no comments posted on the video because I wouldn't be here to approve them. So it made a lot more sense for Mark to host this video so that he can approve the comments. So just wanted to say thanks to Mark for having this on Enchantment of Eternity, and I guess we'll talk about our Q&A video later, but that's going to be on my channel next week.
Yeah, and like I said in my video, I don't mind doing it because it's winter here, it's cold. I got nothing to do except sit inside by the heater and try to keep warm. So,
Yeah, I'm quite the opposite here in the west coast of the United States. It's quite warm here, so.
all right. So before we jump into the specific locations, I just want to real quick touch on the response I've been seeing for this. I don't know if it's just me, if I'm being a bit particular, because it seemed to me that I was getting more dislikes on my review video than normal. So then I looked at everyone else's uh, review videos for episode 10, and it seems like everyone's getting a lot more dislikes on their review videos. Like this one person who normally only gets like 3 or 5 has like 28. I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? Why are so many people disliking it? It's making me think maybe there's such wild, vastly different opinions on this episode that no matter what you say, someone's going to be really unhappy with how you view this episode.
Um, I don't know. That's interesting because I only have one dislike on my video. I mean, I don't know why. I'm not trying to brag or anything. I mean, but that's kind of typical at this point. I would probably have one or two,
All
and
right.
it's so I'm right on par with what I normally would have. So,
Okay. Well,
so I don't know.
I'm not saying I have an insane amount. I have 3, which, that's not like a lot, but it's more than I usually get, like especially so soon. But I've noticed other people have had like a lot, like an insane amount.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know why that would be. That's really interesting. Yeah, I guess opinions just do vary a lot on this episode.
Yeah, it seems like this episode more so than others. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right into locations, and I'm pretty much gonna go in the order of what we saw in the episode. So let's start out in Winterfell, and by Winterfell I mean Stannis, Brienne, Sansa, all that whole kit and caboodle. Let's just roll it up and throw it off and onto one big location.
Yeah.
So let's start off with the differences I noticed between our discussion or review videos is that I thought that Stannis is definitely dead, and you thought that he was definitely alive. So, what's your feeling on that now?
Um, Well, yeah, you're probably thinking we're going to have a disagreement, but remember, I do this as my video as a knee-jerk reaction immediately after I watch the episode. When I've been thinking about it a bit more, I'm leaning more toward he's probably dead. But I'm still not convinced for definitely sure that he's dead. Let me explain why I said what I said in my video. It's because, well, for example, you said in your video that you thought it was, you know, horrible, and you were, I don't know what words you used, but you were kind of using strong language, and you were not happy that they did the jump cut
Yeah.
and that Stannis was killed off screen. Now, if that is indeed what happened and Stannis was killed off screen, I would, you did not say it strongly enough. I would hate it way more than you even did. In fact, I would go so far to say is if they just killed off one of our major characters, somebody we've really been invested in since season 2, we've been following. Love him or hate him, he's a character we've been invested in for most of the series so far. If they just killed him off screen, I would declare that the absolute worst thing the series has ever done by far. You can't do that to us. You can't kill a major character that we've been spending all this time on off screen. That would be horrible. So I guess the reason why I said I think he's alive is because I was giving the showrunners the benefit of the doubt that they would never do something that horrible. That if you're going to kill Stannis, you would give us the dignity of, you know, doing it on screen. Like, that would be the worst thing ever. So I was being optimistic that they wouldn't do that to us. And I'm still holding out hope.
See,
He
I had
might be alive.
See, I just to me that was kind of a stylistic sort of choice because what they call in the industry is a match cut, where they take an image and then cut to a different image that continues to flow, like it has Brienne swinging her sword and it continues with Ramsay swinging his sword. So I think that was just a stylistic editing choice to show how Stannis died. And I've seen this used before, maybe not in Game of Thrones, but in other things where they do show, you know, someone being killed that way. But usually it's not a major character like Stannis. You know, that's like so I totally agree. If they were gonna kill him, and I'm pretty sure that they did, that they should have actually shown him being dead for if anything, because I knew that a lot of people would be having these arguments over the break, and I didn't want to have it in discussions. Is he dead? Is he not dead? Just make it clear. If he's alive, make it clear. If he's dead, make it clear.
Yeah, I will say this though. A lot of people were like, "Well, why would Brienne, you know, not kill him?" And this is a faint possibility, but I think it's within her character to not have what it takes to just outright brutally kill somebody. She has killed people, but it's always been in the course of combat. But just to execute somebody like that, she's she has been clearly established as the most noble character left on the show, maybe besides Jon Snow if he's still alive, which we'll talk about later. But I don't think it's unheard of that she does like a hostage-like situation and she's going to take Stannis, then force him to help her get Sansa. And again, this is my wishful thinking because I want her to be focused on Sansa. You probably saw my video when I was just pissed off. To me, this is the part of the entire episode that all this build-up, she was going for Winterfell, and then she just suddenly turns around and goes to a completely different scenario, and it pissed me off. So
All right.
again, wishful thinking that maybe they're not doing it that
I
badly.
want to I want to touch more on the Brienne and Sansa thing later, but for the moment, I still got a few things to say about the whole Stannis thing, and that is if like you said, if he actually was killed that way, you'll be outraged, which I can understand. I think that's a perfectly legitimate stance. However, my thinking of it is that if he's still alive, I'm going to be pretty pissed because I think it would be totally. I mean, I think it would be totally out of character for Brienne not to kill him. I mean, you do make some valid points, but I still think Brienne, just with Stannis, that's the one person like she was like had this total death wish on. And like even back to season 2, she's like begging Catelyn, "Don't hold me back when I see Stannis because I just want to kill him more than anything." So if she doesn't go through with it, to me that would sort of ruin her character. But that would be too much of a nice guy.
Not at all. That doesn't. Some people just don't have what it takes. Like, I don't to just, kill somebody outright like that. And just because she wants to kill him, maybe with all her heart and passion, she does believe, Catelyn, don't hold me back, and all this stuff. But when it comes to actually doing it, that's a whole different thing than just thinking you can do it.
But
So
it's
I
not
don't
like,
think it's out of her character at all.
but it's not like she's never killed people before. She
Well, she
had that.
kills people during the course of battle. I mean, maybe she decides Stannis is more valuable to her
But it
alive.
seems like the
I mean,
way
I
she
just
was. Other people were complaining that the way she did it has like she was an executioner, like carrying out a lawful sentence, and some people were complaining, well, that she shouldn't have done that. She should have just admitted to herself that she's actually murdering Stannis and she's doing a, straight out murder. But I think the fact that she did like do consider herself like she's just a part enacting the law and makes the whole killing someone thing, the guilt part of it, vanish, because in her mind she's completely within the law
yeah,
and within her rights.
yeah. Yeah, maybe. I think again. I'm now thinking that most likely Stannis is dead. I'm going to be really pissed off that they killed a major character off screen, and I will declare it the worst thing the show has ever done. If that
Wow.
does is proven to be the case. Uh, it is. I mean, you can't kill a major character off screen. They've done too many things this season off screen that should have been on screen, which we'll talk a little bit about later.
Not just
But
this season, but other seasons as well. Like season 4 is pretty.
this season seemed to be the worst for me
Yes, I
personally,
agree.
as
Yeah.
far as doing things off screen that should have been on screen. And then, if this is the case, Stannis is dead, then that would be the king. That would be the worst of the worst of things that happen off screen that should happen on screen. Um,
All right. So yeah, so just really quickly, I want to read this editorial from Watchers on the Wall, because there was an interview with Gwendolyn Christie where she seemed to imply, she didn't outright say, but she seemed to imply that Stannis is actually dead. And rather than read her quotes, I'm just going to read the editorial because I actually agree with it a lot, and I think it puts phrases it better than I could. So Christie has confirmed that Brienne has avenged Renly and that Stannis' army is without a leader, so I think we can put the debate about Stannis' fate to rest. The cutaway to Ramses executing a soldier similar to how Brienne was killing Stannis struck me as a poetic editing choice, but it caused some confusion in viewers. I believe we can consider Stannis confirmed dead with Christie's word. So
and
that makes sense to me.
and I thought when I read that they're a little bit jumping to a conclusion there, because Christie's quote was that, yeah, what was it exactly? That Stannis is, his army is without a leader.
Okay, I can read the exact quote if you like.
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, one thing is that there's all of Stannis' army there without a leader now, and they've actually become disillusioned by him due to his actions towards his daughter. It would be fantastic if perhaps Brienne decided she would be best served as a leader and led that army.
Um, yeah, and I read that and was like, well, I mean, she might just be making assumptions like everyone else. She probably doesn't know whether he's dead or not. So uh, that's what I took out of it.
Yeah, no, you got a point there. That is a valid point, because actors aren't the same as writers.
Yeah.
Like they but you think that typically, I mean, this isn't always the case, but typically directors will give their actors motivations, so they usually give them all the information they need for that scene.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I am now saying that most likely Stannis is dead, but I'm still holding out hope that he's not, because I think that would be terrible to kill a main character off screen. But
Yeah, I think we have different opinions on this, because or different views on whether or not it's how possible it is, because it wouldn't bother me as much as it apparently would bother you if they did. So, I mean, it still bothers me, but not as much as it would bother you.
all right. Um, okay, can we move on now to other things? And with
Yeah.
Stannis. There's something else I wanted to talk about with Stannis's
Yeah.
army, if you don't
Yeah.
mind
Sure.
indulging me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because I said something in my video that I didn't notice anybody else pressing, and maybe just nobody else was bothered by it, nobody else noticed it, but did nobody else that was bothered by the fact that, sellswords would leave Stannis over him killing his daughter? Like, I mean, granted, the sellswords have been kind of more established in the books than in the show as far as their behavior goes.
Yeah.
But there's nothing about sellswords that has been established that they have some kind of moral compass. And keep in mind, a group of sellswords already left because of the snow, and they didn't want to die in the snow. They were like, well, we'd rather live and fight another day and get paid by somebody else, so we're out of here. So these sellswords apparently did not feel the need to leave because of the snow. They were like, oh, we'll tough it out and we'll fight for Stannis. But they left because they have some kind of moral values. It didn't make any sense to me. Like, I wish they had just left this line out about sellswords and just said it was Stannis' army, because that would have actually made sense.
Um, yeah, actually, I thought that was a really. I didn't think about that. That didn't occur to me. But when I saw your video and you pointed that out, I was like, "Hey, that's actually a really good point." I think that's one of those like I don't want to call them nitpicky because it's not nitpicky. It's a valid point, but it's one of those things that pull faults at the episode that you can pull apart. That's just kind of just probably just bad writing. It's just like they just
Yeah.
overlook it. They just because
Yeah.
you're right. It would have made more sense if it was Stannis's men, like
Well,
the
I
Baratheon
guess
army.
what bothers me is that there's such a simple solution to that. It's like all they had to do is not say it was sellswords. They could have just been vague about who it was, and then you can just safely assume it's Stannis's men. But they went out of their way to include the word sellswords, which made no sense. Why did they do that? But yeah, it is kind of nitpicky, but it stood out to me.
That's a valid point, but I think play devil's advocate though. Maybe it wasn't like the morality of it. Maybe it wasn't like, oh, how could dare this guy kill his own daughter? It might be like, well, this guy doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. Let's get the hell out of here before it
Right.
goes south.
Well, but again, he's paying them, so.
Yeah.
I mean, when the Stormcrows left, that made sense because they didn't want to die. They were like, "This is hopeless. Let's get out of here." That I understand. I didn't, especially since this group of sellswords apparently passed the first test, where they were not worried about dying in the snow, that they left over this.
Cool. So is there anything about Selyse you want to talk about? Do you think it's kind of because it's funny we both mentioned how we got asked the question in our discussion video last week about Selyse, and I don't think either one of us said
No,
suicide, at least not immediately.
we
I
didn't.
think we might have said like maybe after a while. I think I said maybe after a couple of years you might commit suicide or something like that.
I
But
said Davos might, if he came back
oh
and
right,
found out that Stannis had done this, and then he would then reject Stannis, but then he would have nowhere else to go, and he would just feel like crap that the guy he had devoted his whole life to was killed his daughter, and then he might kill himself. But we did not mention Selyse killing herself. But once I saw it, I wasn't surprised. It was like a
yeah.
natural reaction from her.
Well, when I saw it, I was like, "Oh, why didn't I think of that? This makes perfect sense."
Yeah, yeah. And in fact, as soon as that guy came to give Stannis some other news, and Stannis was like, "Oh, couldn't possibly be worse than mutilation," my mind went straight to Selyse has killed herself.
And I congratulate you for that because that didn't occur to me. I was just like, what could, I was actually with Stannis. Surely it's not worse than this. And then I was like, oh fuck, it's worse.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Brienne. Uh, other like not this whole Stannis debate, we already had that, but what about like you were saying that her whole storyline was wasted and she's just sitting there watching a candle and then she's leaves at the precise moment the candle gets lit.
So if the purpose of her story arc this season was to kill Stannis, or to attempt to kill Stannis, however you want to look at it, then that should have been what she was aiming for all along. Either we don't see her after episode 3 or whenever it was when she said she's going to kill Stannis, and she does a Varys and then pops back up again in episode 10, or her focus all along is I'm going to go after Stannis and kill him. But with her focus all along being Winterfell, 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 I need to save Sansa, and they save Sansa, and that's what they're building up for. And then when she has the chance, she doesn't even fucking see the candle and doesn't go into Winterfell, and all that setup was for nothing. And I feel like every scene with Brienne was a complete with my time. And I never thought I'd say this, but she was actually more pointless in the show than she was in the books. And I thought her book storyline was pointless. This was worse. There was no reason for her to even be there except to kill Stannis. And I just thought it was probably the well, it's between that and Dorne were the worst things of the season for me.
So I definitely see that point of view, and I think you make a lot of valid points. However, I wouldn't go as far as you do. Well, because mainly, like, I think what they were trying to do, and this was something I thought they might play at, but of course I thought they might do a better job at it than what they did here. But I thought they might play at Brienne having to choose between protecting Sansa and getting her revenge on Stannis, and her making the wrong choice of choosing her revenge over protecting Sansa, and that actually cost, she wasn't there to protect Sansa when she needed to. But I thought that being said, I don't think it was handled the best way by doing it that way, but I do get across what they were trying to get at.
Yeah, if that's what they were getting at, to use your term, it was a utter failure. It was a complete failure. If that's what they were trying to do there. And you and I had discussed that she was definitely going to replace the Ghost of Winterfell, because that's what they were setting up for. Everything was pointing toward that. She was going to go in there and play the Ghost of Winterfell, and maybe not exactly the same, but something similar to that was happening. And so the whole Wyman Manderley thing was cut out completely. And I said I didn't care if Manderley wasn't there, as long as somebody else played his role. And I thought they were perfectly setting up for Brienne to do that. So to pull her away and not have her do that, it's the worst. It's one of the worst things the show did this season. It was horrible.
I totally agree with you there. Like I said in my video, I was a victim of my own expectations because I expected because I've read the books and all this stuff, I expected there to be Ghost of Winterfell story. I expected there to be a replacement for Wyman Manderley, and it seemed the show was making Brienne that replacement, and they just completely scrapped that.
Yeah.
But that being said, I still think, to me, the show could still redeem itself in season 6 if Brienne runs into Sansa and Theon and helps them escape. That would sort of redeem her whole sitting there waiting by the freaking candle all
to me,
season.
It would help, but it's too little, too late. She can't be redeemed at this point. It would be nice if she was involved in Sansa's storyline in some way now, since that's what they've been building up to all freaking season, but they can't redeem it. It's too late. She needed to go in this season, and if she didn't, it was kind of a horrible, horrible choice by the writers. Horrible.
I was gonna say I agree, but maybe not go as far as you. But I agree with your general sentiments that this was not a good writing.
Well, there's another aspect of Winterfell that you hated a little bit more than me, though I see where your point is. So right. Let's talk about what you really disliked in Winterfell.
The thing with the Sansa thing that really bothered me was that she is, like, they did play her up, like, on all the interviews. This is, again, getting to expectations. Because of all the interviews and stuff, they were playing her up like, oh, she's really going to take control in Season 5. She's going to take control of her own destiny. She's going to play the Game of Thrones. And so, everyone had already jumped on that because of the Season 6 debacle. Or Episode 6, sorry. Debacle, and I was holding out until I was like, no, because if she still does something by the end of the season to sort of take control of her life, then I'll be fine. That would make all this worthwhile. And because she just was saved by Theon like she's a damsel in distress, I was just like, Like, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I wouldn't say it's like the worst thing the show has ever done, but it was something that was a huge disappointment to me and one of the blemishes on this episode.
Yeah, and I agree because I had been pumping up Sansa as she's gonna redeem herself, she's gonna be a strong character, and it was a big disappointment that she was just the Jane Pool and Theon saved her. So I definitely agree with that, and I do agree. I mean, I can't argue that Winterfell was a failure as a storyline. There's no argument for that because it was a failure. You're right, and um, now here's me again, probably just clinging to false hope, but because I had said before, well, what if we see Theon um, in the weirwood tree through his perspective and then find out it's Bran in season 6. So I'm still maybe clinging to this hope that we still see from Bran's perspective him talking to Theon through the weirwood tree, and we find out that that's what caused Theon to change. But we see it through Bran's perspective, and we never see it through Theon's perspective. That would be satisfying to me because, as I said in my video, I don't see what caused Theon to change. And I think you said something too, like just earlier
Yeah,
he
I
was
did.
like, "Oh, you better do what she says," and then all of a sudden he does a Darth Vader. Like seemed to be no reason for the change, which I didn't like. So I'm clinging to the slim hope that's probably not going to come to fruition. That maybe we will see from Bran's perspective next year that he did actually talk to Theon through the Weirwood Tree, and we'll find out that that did
Well,
happen.
I'm going to use a phrase that you just used, and that's that for me, that would be too little too late. That we would need to see that beforehand. Getting in retrospect, I mean, it helps a little bit, I guess, but I still think it's too little too
No,
late.
I don't agree there because I think that it explains. We just need an explanation for Theon's. For me personally, I would be satisfied with that.
All right, well, that's fair enough.
Uh, but if they leave it as stands, I think it's very poorly done. You know, leaving out the Ghost of Winterfell, not having some kind of replacement for that. Also, the fact that the snow was not pouring down, that was really. I love the books that the snow was pouring down. People were dying. It was like really suspenseful and intense, and it's like a spring day was there's still snow on the ground, but it's just not the suspense and the intensity from the books was completely lacking. It was just a
Yeah,
big disappointment
I
compared to the books.
I totally agree, which is why, even barring Sansa, say that they hadn't even done the whole put Sansa in Winterfell thing. To me, that's not the main issue. The main issue is that it did not live up to the storyline in the books. It wasn't as good. You didn't have that element, that murder mystery type feel where we're trapped in, who's killing something, blah, blah. They just skipped over that entirely, and what they replaced it with wasn't really that great.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
It was just like a watered down version of what happened
Yeah,
in the
and to
book.
me, I know we've talked about this, and I was bothered by Brienne more than you, but I roll that all into it like that. She was set up to replace the Ghost of Winterfell, and then she didn't, so there was no replacement for it. I mean, the whole shebang. Yeah, I think we're in agreement that Winterfell failed as a storyline this
Yeah.
season.
All right, cool. So the next location I want to talk about is the Wall. So I thought maybe we could discuss Melisandre first, since we're in Winterfell, and she sort of was between Winterfell and the Wall. So I think that would be a good way to segue into into the Wall is by discussing Melisandre, and that's another sort of difference that I noticed between our initial reviews was I said I thought I knew for certain why Melisandre got out of there, where you thought it was a bit questionable why she left. So what are your feelings on that now?
It was, and I chalk it up to again something that was off screen that should have been on screen, and this is something they've been doing a lot this season. Um, Stannis' death, of course, would be the biggest thing. There was also Littlefinger apparently had some conversation with Cersei where Cersei tells
Yeah.
him why she really called him down. That should have been on screen.
Yeah.
What we saw the last time we saw Melisandre on screen, she was upbeat. She was like, the Lord of Light has come through for us, and things are going well. And so apparently, somewhere off screen, she lost faith and she decided to leave. And I saw nothing on screen that would cause her to do that. So that is something that I needed to see on screen because it confused me at first when they said she left. I was like, why did she leave? Why would that doesn't make any sense to me. Later on, I figured out why she left, but it was still poorly done. We should have seen why she left.
Well, to me, and I have to watch this scene again to be sure because I'm just going off my memory, but I know my initial reaction when watching the scene was when the general guy, who in the credits is listed as Baratheon General, when that dude said, "Oh, half their army left," I think if I recall, they had a shot of Melisandre looking like, "Oh fuck," and so I think that's why I had assumed that that's why she left because she heard of that.
But that seems a little flimsy. Like just a second ago, she was like, "Oh, the Lord of Light has come through. Oh, half our army left. Well, I'm out of here." I mean, that seems really, really weak. Like for somebody who has such strong faith in the Lord of Light, that's what breaks her. Just because half the army left before, and she didn't. She
Well, I
didn't.
think because she likes to
So
read,
that's
she likes to read signs, so I think maybe she took that and the fact that Selyse was being hanged or hung herself as a sign that things are fucked. Because I do sort
it.
of agree with you. There was part of me that initially was thinking this isn't quite right, but then I thought, oh, actually, maybe it does work out.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Your reasoning there. We needed to see that more on screen. There was just one little pan over to Melisandre was just not cutting it. I
That
need for her to make such a huge turnaround that would be out of character for her. I need to see why that happened, and we didn't.
that I totally agree with. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's so we really basically agree. We just had different ways of talking
Different
about it, but
initial reactions.
and
Yeah.
different initial reactions. But yeah, I thought that was poorly done because I did eventually figure out, oh, okay, now I see what was going on here, but it was just poorly done, just the same as the whole thing with Littlefinger and the thing with Lancel, all that stuff. We got it, we got what they were going for, but the way they did it was
Yeah.
not
And
very well done.
the other thing about Melisandre I noticed in our reviews was slightly different, but I don't think this is going to be a big point of disagreement between us because I kind of feel a bit differently than what I had originally said. But was that I was sort of like, oh, Melisandre is definitely like not questioning her faith because she's putting all the blame on Stannis. Where you was like, oh, she's totally questioning her faith. But the thing is, after watching that scene again of seeing once she gets to the wall and how like depressed she looks, I think, well, actually, maybe you might be right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that she is having a crisis of faith. Whether that be with just simply Stannis or with uh, the Red God in general, it might just be just with Stannis as Azor Ahai and everything that they've been doing, and maybe she's misinterpreted her visions, or it may not be a complete crisis of faith where she doesn't believe in the Red God. There's some minor crisis of faith at least where she's second guessing a lot of what she's done or what's happened over the last couple seasons.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. That makes sense to me that she like I still think she wouldn't lose faith in the Lord of Light. She would just lose faith in herself for trusting in Stannis and saying, "Oh, maybe I was wrong this whole time. It's not really Stannis." And so
Yeah,
that would make sense to actually bring her around to think it's someone else, just like the books sent some hints that she might be starting to think the Azor Ahai is someone else. So I think should we just go ahead and jump right into the
yeah. This is a good segue into
yeah, to
Jon
Jon
Snow.
Snow. Yeah. So because I know like you were worried before that Melisandre's not there, and I was kind of worried because we even said, oh, are they going to just have Melisandre go back to the wall? They're not going to do that. That's ridiculous. But of course we couldn't
But they
foresee.
did. but they did do it.
Yeah, because we couldn't foresee that Stannis was actually going to lose the battle.
Yeah.
So now that Melisandre's back, it seems like, oh, that's great. You know, she can bring Jon Snow back to life, and everything is all set for the resurrection until we see this freaking article by Entertainment Weekly out where they interviewed Kit Harington. And I'll just read you the relevant paragraph from that interview. So this this is from the interviewer who says, I was talking to Dan Weiss and he said Jon is really dead, but George R. R. Martin left open that possibility that the character might not be dead in the books. And then the cast salary contract story came out last year and had your name among those receiving raises for season 6 and an option for season 7. So let me ask you, is Jon really dead? So then Kit Harington answers, this is my understanding of it. I had to sit down with Dan and Dave. We did the Tony Soprano walk, letting an actor know they're being whacked. And they said, look, you're gone. It's done. And as far as the salary thing goes, that angered me when that story came out. I don't know where it came from, but it was inaccurate in many ways. It's going to put questions into your hand and into your head and into fans' heads that things are not what they are. Quite honestly, I've never been told the future of things in the show, but this is one time I have. They sat me down and said, this is how it is. If anything in the future is not like that, then I don't know about it. It's only David and Dan and George heads. But I've been told I'm dead. I'm dead. I'm not coming back next season. So that's all I can tell you, really.
All right. Well, I have some ideas. So what is your take on this?
I'm very conflicted on this because on the one hand, whenever like actors giving interviews like this has always panned out to be true, like with Michelle Fairley saying there's going to be no Lady Stoneheart not coming back to the show, and plus the actors saying like I'm actually looking for other work. And it seems to me the only way this cannot be true if the actors outright lying, if this is a part of a plot to fool people into thinking Jon Snow is dead.
Well, I have 3 possibilities of how Jon Snow could still be alive, or still come back, I should say, not necessarily alive, but do you want to hear them?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So here's my 3 possibilities. Number 1, and this is something a lot of people were saying in a lot of the comments for my video and then other things that I was reading online, where they were like, oh, well, technically he said season 6 be there. He said he's dead and he won't be back season 6. So technically he could be dead, but he gets resurrected in season 7. There could be a loophole there, which I don't know if, I don't know if that's likely. And actually, I don't know if I want Jon Snow to not be in season 6. I would want them to resolve this sooner than that. But
yeah, I just want to jump in here and say that I don't think that's a very likely possibility as well, because people are always looking for loopholes in like Michelle Fairley's interview and stuff and saying, oh, maybe she said dead but didn't really mean dead. So I'm pretty much not on board with the whole loophole theory at all.
Yeah, well, yeah, I still consider it a possibility. I just don't think it's a likely one.
Yeah.
And then the second one is that they are just flat out lying, and that Dan and Dave are lying, and and Kit Harington is lying, and they gave Kit Harington a script and said, this is what you said. Like this so-called Tony Soprano walk that they gave him, it was actually, okay, this is what you're going to say to the media. And that they're trying their best to hide the fact that Kit Harington is coming back, and of course then they would have to do other ways of trying to get his presence on set, keep that from being leaked. I don't know how they would keep it secret forever, but that they just really, really don't want this to get leaked, so they're having Kit Harington lie. And then there's somewhat of a precedent for this happening recently, and it wasn't as blatant of a lie as this, so it wasn't quite the same thing, but I think it's sort of similar, is that Isaac Hempstead Wright, the guy who plays Bran, he was still implying are strongly implying that he was going to be in season 5, even after Hodor screwed up and let it slip that they weren't going to be in season 5. Clearly, he wasn't supposed to do that, and he should probably just stick to saying Hodor in interviews because he screwed up. But Isaac Hempstead Wright was, I assume, following directions from Dan Dave or whoever who's telling him, you have to tell them you're going to be in season 5. So he basically said it was in season 5, even though he wasn't. It was kind of a lie.
Yeah.
And so it's not completely unprecedented, or although it wouldn't be such, it's not quite the same thing.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I didn't think about that. There's actually a precedent out there, but yeah, what he said was that I'm getting ready to film for season 5, which obviously he knew was bullshit at the time. But I mean, you're right. This would be like a step forward, but I guess because of that, maybe it's not out of the realm of possibilities.
Yeah, and I've heard mixed reactions amongst fans and reviewers. I heard one reviewer flat out say, "Oh, they could just lie." I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, what's stopping them from lying? They could just lie. Um, so that's a possibility. And now the third possibility is that they're not lying. Harrington is off the show, and Jon Snow is dead. But he's going to be resurrected by Melisandre into a new body, and so he'll be played by a different actor. Um, this I haven't heard anyone else talk about this. I just pulled this out of my butt, so it's probably not going to happen. And actually, I don't know if I would want that to happen for to have Jon Snow played by a different actor. I think that would be weird, um, and it would be going to great just to keep it a secret that Jon Snow's coming back.
Yeah, that would be that to me. That seems like going way too far just to keep a secret. And plus, I think audiences would turn on the show if they had someone other than Kit Harington play Jon Snow, because I think they've grown to love Kit Harington.
I don't know. It depends on how they pulled it off. I mean, they could
I don't know.
they could pull it off. I don't know. Well, that's just three possibilities that I thought that
Yeah.
because Jon Snow he's so important to the story. Uh, he Well, for one thing, he's important to Melisandre's story. I mean, as I think in the books, I've talked about this in some of my other videos, that Melisandre's already in A Dance with Dragons, becoming more and more on Team Jon Snow. I think that process has already begun in A Dance with Dragons. In the show, it hadn't, but it really seems set up for that. That she's lost faith in Stannis. Stannis is now apparently dead. I think Melisandre has to have a Azor Ahai, or else what's she gonna do? I mean, I can't imagine that character not having an Azor Ahai to believe in. So if Stannis is defeated and most likely dead, and then Jon Snow is just dead permanently, then what the hell's they going to do with Melisandre? I think Jon Snow needs resurrected from
Yeah.
Melisandre's character.
Well, out of the three options you gave, I think option number 2 is the only one I'd really buy. That's the only thing. If they're just flat out lying, and I think it is. At first I think like that sounds on thin ice, but the more I think about it, the more I think is. And the funny thing is I was just watching a review by 4 non-book readers. There were no book readers there. No one had anything about the books, and no one there thought Jon Snow wasn't going to come back to life. Every review I've seen, even book reader, non-book reader, it doesn't matter. Nobody believes Jon Snow is dead. So I think maybe there might be lying in order to try to trick people to think, because they know there's already this community of book readers who had these theories for years that Jon Snow isn't really dead. George R. R. Martin has hinted at it. So maybe this is their way to try to, we want you to think Jon Snow is dead, so let's put out this interview so you actually think he's dead.
Yeah, and in fact, I saw where they said something along the lines of, this should quell all theories and any ideas that Jon Snow is still alive and all this should put it to an end, and it hasn't, as you just said, not at all. Everybody's so they're if that's their goal, then they're failing miserably. So I think at some point they should just say, okay, we lied. I mean, they
Yeah.
may as well, because nobody's buying it
Yeah,
anyway.
there's too many reasons from a practical standpoint of why he just can't be dead permanently, and I just wouldn't. It would just be mind blowing. For one thing, like George R. R. Martin has already hinted, like he hasn't outright said, but you know he had that smirk. He kind of hinted that Jon Snow is going to be alive somehow in the books in the future, and if that's true, but not the show, then that would be an earth-shattering deviation. That would be like beyond, like 10 times, 100 times beyond any deviation the show has done from the books so far. That would just be,
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually said this recently in a comment on my how Game of Thrones will end video when we were talking about this, is that uh, maybe I should have done 2 separate videos for the show and the books, because I kind of combined it into one video. But it's like, well, if they're going to be that different, then I guess I really need to do 2 separate videos. And it's funny how many people in that video are commenting, "Oh, well, so much for your theories. Jon Snow is dead now." And I'm like, well, Jon Snow's been dead since 2011 in the books. And also, I specifically said in my video that I believe Jon Snow in the books wargs in the Ghost, and people just ignore that and say, "Oh, well, there goes that theory." But it still stands for the books. I'm having a little bit of doubt. I mean, Dan and David convinced me a little bit that what if he is permanently dead in the show, and then that would be an unbelievable deviation from the books if
yeah.
that were the case.
And the other thing is the R plus L equals J. They've been hinting at that. Like they even this season, as recently as this season, they went so far to like hint at it and bring it home. So what's the point of doing that if, and you know, and that's another thing. Kit Harington even said in an interview, "Oh, I'm really disappointed that he died before he could find out who his mother was." And I'm like, but that doesn't make sense from a story standpoint. Why, especially why bring it up and hint at it and then just kill off the thing? It just doesn't make sense. Uh, and then for another thing is who the wall, because the hard home and the White Walkers, the wall is now like a very important storyline. And now Sam's left, and if you kill off John, who's left to be at the wall? Are we gonna follow the adventures of Alistair, Thorne, and Olly?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, maybe Melisandre and Davos, I guess.
Mm-mm. I
Yeah,
mean,
but I don't even know how long they would stay there with no Jon Snow there. It seems
yeah,
like they would probably leave.
yeah.
So,
I mean, I
yeah,
brought up the possibility before last week about Davos maybe joining the Night's Watch, and maybe you know they'd go that route. But again, that seems like crazy land. That's like totally different if they did
yeah,
something like that.
yeah. Now, there are just too many reasons from a storytelling standpoint that it would just be weird to yank Jon Snow out of the story. Yeah, there's R plus L equals J, somebody to follow at the wall. And what I mentioned earlier, you kind of didn't really comment on about Melisandre and how, she needs an Azor Ahai. I think Jon Snow
Yeah,
is
yeah. That's
important
another.
for her storyline, especially if Stannis is dead. So there's so many reasons that he has to be has to be there. So
Yeah,
and
and plus, like having Melisandre go back to the wall in this episode is like a big hint. Melisandre's back because that's another thing we were worried about. Like if she was still off with Stannis and Stannis was still like it had an army, was still like alive and strong, then I'd be like stroking my chin. But Melisandre's back at the wall, so it's just like it must be the case.
yeah, there has to be some way. And I still ruled out 2 of my 3 possibilities. I would not be shocked if any of those 3 possibilities came. I would probably say number 2 would be most likely, but I would not be shocked if any of those 3 happened. But I think he can't be dead permanently on the show. It would just be crazy.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
I think like that it would be different from the books and how he comes back because in the books
yeah,
they're playing up the war game because that's maybe an
right.
argument some people might have of why he's really dead because they weren't playing up the war game. He didn't say ghost, they didn't hint at the warging. His eyes would have gone all white if he was warging into ghost. So obviously they're not going that route, but they could go another route. And I was actually had a theory about that. Something that the show is different from the books that the show could do is because in the show Melisandre has met Beric Dondarrion and Thoros of Myr and the whole bringing people back to life thing, and so she's introduced to that concept. So maybe she will try to employ that concept herself. And if they did that, I think that would justify that whole Thoros of Myr storyline, because I think like the payoff in the books for that was Lady Stoneheart, and since they didn't do Lady Stoneheart, it didn't seem like there was a real purpose of having that.
Yeah. Do you think there's any chance she runs into Thoros of Myr, or do you think she's just I mean, she would have to probably travel, because I don't think they're going to the wall.
Yeah.
But I don't know. She probably would just remember that, probably most likely, than running into him. And another thing I said in my video, this was before I knew about the Kit Harington interview, was that Melisandre believes that the sacrifice for Shireen failed, and what if it didn't fail? What if it was that it did work for Azor Ahai, but Azor Ahai is Jon Snow, and
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Jon Snow
Yeah.
comes back to life.
Yeah.
Now I guess this is a theory that's been around for a while. In fact, a couple of videos ago, I think somebody asked a question and mentioned this theory, but they said, "Oh, well, now that theory's off the table because Shireen is dead," or something like that. They thought. I don't remember exactly, but that theory's not off the table. I think absolutely that Shireen's death would pay for Jon Snow's life, and it's interesting that they had the line from Jock and Agar, only death can pay for life.
Yeah.
Or is it the other?
Sure.
Or is it the other way around? I always get it mixed
And
up.
that was actually a repeat from what's her face from season 1, the
Season 1,
yeah,
the witch.
who Daenerys met. Yeah.
Yeah, but they brought that line back in this episode. And also, Sam said Jon always comes back
Yes.
a couple episodes ago. I mean, come on. He said Jon always comes back.
Yeah.
If that's not it, like, I don't even know why. If they're lying, I don't even know why they're bothering.
All these things are Chekhov's resurrection.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean...
But yeah, what I was thinking, that's interesting about the Shireen, about the death paying for life, because I was thinking, and that to me that would kind of go along the lines of what they did in the book, because in the book, apparently, like, she asked to see Azor Ahai and she's seen Snow, so a lot of people think, oh, she's seeing Jon Snow, where I think the sacrificing Shireen is supposed to like help Azor Ahai. But she finds out it's not Stannis, and it's actually going to help Jon Snow, who's really Azor Ahai, and maybe that's one of the reasons why Melisandre left Stannis, because maybe that's coming to she realized because it didn't help Stannis that he's not Azor Ahai, and she went to the wall because she thinks that Jon is. Maybe.
Could be. I don't know if she's made that conclusion yet. She seems too depressed to have made that determination yet, but maybe. I don't know. I wonder if she thinks, if she's given up hope that, what her visions were or false, or if she thinks that she needs to find another way for them to come true. So maybe the Bolton's banners really are going to be burned to the ground. Maybe they're going to be burned to the ground by Jon Snow.
Yeah, and because, well, like I said in my prediction video, if he is brought back to life, then maybe technically he could like forsake his Night's Watch vows because he did die. So
yeah. Especially if he was in a different body played by a different actor, nobody would recognize. But even he wouldn't have to be bound to the Night's Watch anymore.
Yeah, because I think we got the foreshadowing with Jon Snow and Melisandre and all that. So that's another, to me, that's another Chekhov's moment that they need to pay off, because earlier this season with Melisandre being all, on Jon Snow, to me it seems like they can't just, that has to lead to something else.
Yeah, that's another thing. There's so many Chekhov's resurrection. I mean, there's so many things. When we stop recording this video, we'll probably think of more things, because there's so much that's pointing to it.
Yeah. Okay, so real quick, I just want to touch on Ollie real quick. I think we've already talked to death about how they overshadowed his storyline in the show, but what I think is interesting is Ollie is panning out to be the new Joffrey, really. Like, I've seen a lot of people compare like Joffrey, Ramsay, Stannis, and now Ollie. But not, not that Ollie is as despicable as Joffrey or Ramsay, but he's just as hated as Joffrey. That the audience really, really hates this guy.
Um, I don't share that hatred. I really blame more the writers and the showrunners how they've handled this character, just beating us to death with the foreshadowing. Um, but I don't hold anything against the character himself. I don't. I mean, yeah, he's nowhere near that range to me. Where Joffrey, Ramsay. I mean, that's ridiculous for me personally. But I just don't like the way the show handled the character. That's all.
Yeah, I think. Sorry to use this again, but I think it was they failed. It was a failure with their Ollie thing because and they're inside the episode. You can see what they're trying to get across. It's like, oh, it's so heartbreaking for Ollie. I was like, I see what you're trying to do there, but you didn't quite make it. You overshadowed. You foreshadowed it too much, and it didn't have the impact that you wanted it to have.
And this is exactly what I said in my review. I said this is supposed to be heartbreaking, but I didn't find it heartbreaking because they just beat us to death with it. They foreshadowed it way too much. So I
Yeah.
knew, without watching any inside the episode, I knew exactly what they were going for,
Yeah.
but they failed. You're right, it's another failure.
Yeah, cool. So, all right, so let's talk about Sam now because the one major difference I noticed, like other than the fact that he's very, very late compared to the books, is that he's going by land to get to Old Town. At least that's what I think. I mean, in the books, you would of course leave by carriage to go to Eastwatch and then catch a boat, but I doubt that the show's going to do it that way. The show usually will, if someone's leaving by land, they're leaving because it looked like he was in that carriage and he was hunkered down for a long journey. And
Yeah,
plus, oh, go ahead.
I think they're skipping Braavos.
Yeah, yeah, I
He's
do.
he's missed the boat, so to speak, for Braavos. They're skipping over that. They're just gonna have him go by land down there. I believe.
And I think that would give him the opportunity to stop by and see his family because there's spoiler casting list for season 6 that seemed to imply it's not sure that his whole family is going to be in the show. And for me, I thought, how are they going to have that? He'd have to, if he went by boat, he'd have to like go in out of his way and go more inland from Old Town in order to get to his family. But if he's going by land, he would cross directly past there.
Yeah, I think that's what they're doing. I think he's
Even
going to land.
even though that is the ridiculously longest journey to take by.
Yeah. Well, he can use some of that little finger magic, and he can get there in a couple episodes.
Yeah, travel conditions and stuff is always different in the show than in the books because I don't think
Yeah.
George R. R. Martin would ever have a character travel that far by land, but the show doesn't seem to care as much,
Yeah.
which is fine. They can do it their way. I've long since gotten over that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so do you think do you think it's weird that Sam is the one who wanted to go rather than John being the one forcing him to go?
No, because that's kind of how it's been set up in the show. I think they've built up to it that way. I think it makes sense within the context of the show. So I don't think it's weird. I think it makes sense for what they have been doing.
So what you're saying is that it doesn't look like Sam's going to Braavos. I think that's the case, but I was kind of wondering, just because Sam's not going to Braavos doesn't mean he doesn't meet Arya, because I thought maybe Arya gets sent to Old Town next season and she takes the place of the Faceless Men there. But of course, that timeline wise, that would have to happen late in the season because she's very far from being an official Faceless Man, and yeah.
Yeah. Um, I don't think so, personally. I've always thought that the Faceless Men was just going to be another notch on her belt, just something she learns from, that she's not actually going to become a Faceless Man in the end. So to keep with my old theory that I've had for a while, I would have to say that that's not going to happen. But I could be completely wrong, so who knows?
Well, I think it's still possible that maybe she's a Faceless Man for a little while and then just lets it go.
Yeah. Maybe, yeah. I'm kind of not feeling it, but
Oh yeah,
who
fair
knows?
enough. All right. Well, and on that case, let's just go straight to Braavos here and talk about the this Braavosi scenes. Now, I couldn't tell from your review. Did you like these scenes as much as I did? Because I loved these scenes.
Oh, you couldn't tell from my review. I used the word badass, awesome. I mean, I didn't think I was really holding back. I thought I made my love for this scene pretty clear. I didn't specify that this was the best of the episode the way you did. Um, um, but it was definitely, well, there's another scene that I liked more than you that I thought was
Oh, okay.
up there, which we'll talk about later. But this was definitely one of the strongest parts of the episode, and yeah, I loved it for so many different reasons.
See, a lot of people were complaining about Meryn Trant and how they're just going overboard with how much of a scumbag he is. It's like, okay, first, they said, oh, he likes to sleep with little girls, and some people are like, oh, that's a bit over the top. And now they're showing him beating little girls. I'm like, oh, right, enough already. But I've heard another point of view, which I totally agree with, that it actually helps the gruesome way that Arya kills Meryn. You don't want the audience feeling a lick of sympathy for him. So by making him so despicable, they ensured that that's not going to happen.
And I agree 100% with that point of view as well. I don't buy all of this complaining about that. I agree with that. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely that they needed to do that to make his, even if she didn't kill him so brutally, it's the fact that she killed him. He needed to be, completely despicable, that there wasn't a shred of chance that you would have any sympathy for him. So I agree completely.
Yeah, and I also heard an interesting comment about how, and I didn't think about this, is how looking at it in retrospect in like season 2, where Meryn Trant was beating the crap out of Sansa, you actually think that he actually enjoys hitting little girls and like stripping them of their clothes. And I think maybe it's a chicken and egg type deal. Maybe that's how he got his fetishes because working for Joffrey and doing that has made him sort of into that sort of thing.
Probably not. Usually, if you're, a pedophile or an abuser, you're that way for a long, long time, for most of your
Ah,
life. It usually starts earlier in life. So I would say that probably didn't. He was already like that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's fair to say. But it does mean that he was the perfect man for that for that job that Joffrey
Yeah,
wanted him to do.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Cool. So what do you gather about the whole, you know, Jack and Hagar scene with him switching with the waif and all that crap? Was your reaction sort of similar to mine, where you think, well, maybe this isn't the same guy that we saw in season 2?
Yes, in fact, that's what I said, uh, and I took it a step further to say that who knows, who's Arya been talking to this whole time? I mean, it could be switching up all the time. I mean, because I think they're really emphasizing that the faceless men really are no one. Like they can have any face at any time. Um, Arya really wasn't friends with that guy. She doesn't even know who he was because he was no one. Um, so I was toying with the idea, like maybe Arya has been talking to like 3 or 4 different Jaqen H'ghars. Maybe the waif has been 3 or 4 different people.
Yeah,
Who knows? I mean,
because yeah, absolutely. Because we've seen was Jack and the Garden Waif at any one time, but there could actually be like 10 or 20 people just rotating faces, and it could be. And I think
yeah,
that's kind of the point. And I think the scene did an awesome job of driving that home because the whole season they've said, "Oh, no one." You just kind of think no one. And me, maybe it's because I didn't pay enough attention to the books, but to me, I didn't even get that from the books. Whereas in the scene, it really drove the point home that there literally are no one. They
yeah.
really do have no identity.
I thought it was fantastic. Yeah, I thought it was. It's probably the best change from the books in that episode, at least. Um, Maybe one of my favorite ones of the entire season, as far as things that they changed from the books. I
Yeah.
thought it was great.
I mean, it wasn't that big of a deviation from the book. I just thought it was making it better. It was
Yeah.
improving
Well, the
upon.
whole thing with there being two Jack and Agars, well, Jack and Agar isn't even there in the first
Yeah,
place.
that's true.
uh, so, I mean, Jack and Agar is still on the table to be in Oldtown because maybe neither one of those guys were Jack and Agar.
Yeah, that is absolutely true.
Uh, so,
And
I mean, because we
maybe
don't
it
know.
maybe it doesn't matter who the guy in season 2 was. Maybe it will never be specified who, which one is which. We just see random Jack and Agars everywhere, and it just doesn't matter who's who.
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely true. Oh, and I just have to say, by the way, that I loved your Star Wars match that you did in your video. You did the one with Theon and Darth Vader throwing the Emperor over, which I also mentioned in my video. But one thing that I didn't mention in my video, but I did think of, was uh, the scene with Arya seeing herself was a lot like the scene of Luke Skywalker seeing his own face in the Darth Vader helmet when he was on Dagobah. I was going to mention it, but I was like, I made one Star Wars reference, but you
Yeah,
just did you did the mishmash at the beginning. I thought it was good because I
yeah.
also thought of that. I just didn't
Yeah,
say it.
yeah. That was the first thing that came to mind. And but the Emperor thing, I've heard a lot of people making that connection. So apparently that's not a that's a pretty
It was pretty
obvious one.
obvious. Yeah.
Uh, in fact, someone made a comment on my video pointing out another obvious one that I missed. I could have done a third Star Wars reference, which was Jamie saying to Myrcella, "I have something to tell you," and then cutting to Darth Vader saying, "I am your father."
Well, I made that reference a couple weeks ago.
Oh, did
He
you?
was
Oh,
talking to Myrcella when he was talking to Myrcella before. I was like, "Can you
all
imagine what
right.
would happen if he said, 'Oh, I am your father'?" Which we'll we'll
Yeah.
talk about that when we get there. But before we leave Braavos, though, I wanted to touch quickly on where we think Arya goes from here. Because do you think she'll be blind for longer on the show? Do you think they'll make it a bigger deal? So instead of like her just being blind for one episode, like she was only blind for like one chapter in the books. Do you think they'll draw it out more?
I don't think so. That's my initial feeling is that they won't because I mean they could, but I don't think they will because the show is infamous for streamlining storylines. Like the Daenerys stuff, which we'll also get to later, that was a lot condensed too because we had like a whole chapter of her wandering around. Oh, I'm so alone. So I kind of pictured like the same thing happening with Arya. Like although in the book she was hardly blind at all for that long. So
Yeah,
I think it will play out the same way. I think it will just be an episode or two.
yeah. Now, it's implied in the books that she wargs in the cats. Is that off the table in the show? Because it seems like it is to me.
Yeah, I would say so. I think they're just skipping the whole warging thing. Unless, however, I was thinking maybe because sometimes, like the R plus L equals J and other things, they hold off on like foreshadowing it until they're getting ready to reveal it. So maybe they're just holding off on the whole warging thing because they're not until they're ready to reveal it. So I'm still holding out some hope. So there's some hope that maybe season 6 will get into the warging thing, but that's just a slim hope. Other than
Well, then
that, it seems
she better start having wolf dreams because that was the big precursor, and she didn't have any wolf dreams in
yeah.
the show. So yeah, I'm kind of think that they're, as far as the Starks go, Bran's going to be the only warrior on the show. But you're right; they could do that like they did with R plus L equals J and introduce it later. So who knows?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Okay, so let's move on to Dorne. And so the question I want to ask you about Dorne, I'm curious to get your opinion on this because I'm not, because
Yeah, that's kind of sums it. That kind of sums it up.
well, because I'm not really sure where I stand on this myself. But what do you think is worse, Jaime's storyline in The Feast for Crows or the Dorne storyline in season 5?
I didn't like either of them. Um, I would kind of personally still lean toward Feast for Crows being a little worse.
Oh,
Um,
oh, okay.
for me, I'm sure most people will disagree with that, but
Because I
um,
remember in your Feast for Crows review, you were going on about how much you hated that storyline.
Yes, and I really did. It was so freaking boring and pointless. He was just wandering around talking to people. Um, you know, but the Dorne storyline, I mean, it just had so much potential. Like, I didn't automatically think that it was going to suck just because they cut out Arya and Martell. I think there
Yeah.
was a lot they still could have done with Valeria Sand replacing Arya and Martell, but they, to use that word again, it was a failure. They failed. Uh, so I don't think just cutting out Arya and Martell inherently makes it not good, but I mean, they could have made it good, but it was a failure.
Yeah.
And to
Yeah,
me, a big disappointment.
I totally agree. I think like I wasn't even like it wasn't up until this episode I was ready to declare Dorne a failure. Like we talked about last week, I would declare it kind of a disappointment, but if they came up with like this awesome thing, I would have been like, okay, now I see why we done Dorne. It's not a failure. The first couple episodes were a disappointment, but this makes it all worthwhile. But this wasn't it. They didn't do that. And the main thing,
No,
and
no.
this is something I've been I was holding off talking about in my spoiler-free review because it's kind of spoilery, is Durant didn't reveal his master plan. Because I remember your predictions video for Dorne, you're like, you didn't have specifics, but you made a list. These are the things that are going to have to happen. And your last thing was Durant reveals his master plan. And they didn't do that! So it's like...
Yeah, and that was the number one biggest disappointment about this whole storyline for me is that there was no Duran's master plan, and maybe I'm clinging to hope, thinking, well, maybe Illyria Sand was doing that on behalf of Duran. Other people have brought up some problems with that, like, well, what about Trystane? Because Trystane is at Jaime's mercy now, so why would Duran
Yeah.
do that? But
I actually...
he could have a plan for that too.
Yeah.
For all
Well,
we know.
I had that inner monologue myself because at first I was like, oh, wait, what if Alaris Sand is actually working with Duran? This is his plan all along to kill Myrcella so Trystane's free to marry Daenerys. But then I was did the same thing. He wouldn't put Trystane in harm's way like that. But then maybe because I think maybe the boat they're on seems to be a Dornish boat. So it doesn't seem like Jaime and Bronn would really have say. But once Trystane's in King's Landing, then he could be easily like taken hostage and captive and whatever.
Well, except that since it is a Dornish boat, that maybe they're not going to King's Landing at all. I mean, maybe they're going to do something with Jaime and Bronn. I don't know. I'm grasping at straws. I want Duran to have a master plan. And the other thing I mentioned in my video is why would Illyria Sand do this when Duran was pretty clear what would happen to her if he
I know.
betrayed her, and there's no way that she could think that Duran's not going to know it was her. Of course he is. So why would she do this? Does she have a death wish? So the only
Yeah.
other logical reason for her to do this is she is doing it in conjunction with himself. And as far as Trystane and all that, there's a plan in place to cover that. And Duran does have a master plan. But if this is the case, we didn't see it, and that sucks.
That's what I was gonna say. If this is the case, we should have seen it. They should have had that scene where the sand snakes and they're wiping off the poison, have Duran there smiling. Then we know. That's all you need. Just have him there, sort of being in on it. But because we didn't get that, I'm kind of leaning towards maybe they're not going that route. I mean, it's still possible, and I think it would make things better. Because if it's not the case, then she's an idiot. What is she doing?
Yeah, exactly. What is she thinking?
Like this whole
Yeah,
Dorne storyline from the entire season was just too simple. It was just too simplified. It was just like, oh, Alara trying to kill Myrcella, and that's all there was to it. Well, there was a lot more ins and outs to it in the books. And as I said in my review, even the Dorne storyline in the books wasn't seen as that great. A lot of people didn't like that, but that everyone agrees that it's miles ahead of what they did in the show.
yeah. And I personally liked what they did in the books. I liked the Dornish chapters in the books, and so to me, this was a major disappointment. They did not live up to the books at all. It was, yeah, another huge chalk up, another huge failure for season 5.
Okay, so what do you make out of Myrcella being dead? And it's funny because I've heard a lot of different reactions. I think maybe you were one of them who were saying, "Ooh, maybe she isn't dead." But my take on it is she's dead.
No, no, I was definitely not one of those.
Oh, okay. All
She,
right. Cool.
no, I definitely was not. She may not necessarily be dead immediately, but I don't. She doesn't have the antidote, so
Yeah.
unless Tristan is carrying the antidote around with him,
Yeah.
I think that she is very likely dead.
Yeah. I was
It
about to
may
say.
not be immediately, but
I was
she's not
about
gonna
to say
survive.
that maybe that's a part of Duran's plan is to give Tristan the antidote. But then, what would be the point of that? Oh, you're gonna die. Oh no, let's save you. It'd be like a Bronn thing. But the Bronn thing was there to make it clear that to specify it was a setup for this to make it clear that you need the antidote to live.
Yeah, it's true, and it makes sense for me. Show perspective, it still doesn't make sense to me from a sand snake perspective why they would do that.
Yeah, that's true.
I,
It's a case of the writers saying, "Here, we want to show you something."
right, yeah,
But
and
yeah, go ahead.
and also so that Braun would know immediately what it was. Jamie wasn't there when
Oh,
that happened,
yeah,
but Braun will be able to tell him, "Oh, this is some fucked up shit here."
yeah.
Like he'll know exactly what it is,
I
so
mean,
that Jamie will know.
Jamie might not have known exactly what it was, but I'm sure he'd be able to. He'd think something was really fishy about this.
Right, but then he doesn't have to just think. Braun can just tell him
Yeah,
straight
yeah,
up.
yeah. No, totally
This is
agree.
what
Yeah,
happened.
yeah. But so this is an interesting change from a book. This is another character who is still alive in the books, as far as we know, and is now dead in the show. So this brings up. So I want to say is two down, one to go, as far as Maggie the Frog's prophecies.
Right. Right, yeah, which I've always believed was going to come true. And I said in my How It Will End video that Cersei's going to kind of go mad after all arcs are gone. And I think Tommen's going to be the last one, but I think he is going to go maybe next season.
Yeah, could be. Uh, because I just realized they're going in order from oldest to youngest as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they are. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, do you think because this happened in the show that's going to happen in the books, maybe, of course, not this way, but do you think that Myrcella is doomed?
Yeah, well, that's always been my prediction that Maggie the Frog's, prophecy would come true in both places, book and show. So I think she's doomed in both.
All right.
I've always thought that. Not necessarily that I thought she was going to die this season on the show, but I think all three of Cersei's kids are doomed in both book and show.
I'll have to go back and watch the video. If I recall our little "Who's Gonna Die" thing game we played before season 5 started, I said Marcel, and I'm pretty sure you named her as probable.
I don't remember what I said for
Uh,
her because I would name her as probable in the overall story arc, but I don't know that I necessarily would have thought she was going to die this season.
oh, right. So that was a bit of a
Yeah,
shock.
yeah. Not a shock, but I don't think that I was expecting her to die this season. But as we both said in our video, as soon
Yeah.
as there was like, "Oh, this is heartwarming scene with Jane," I was like, "Oh, she's dead."
Well, to me, and I think I'm different than most people. Is I was surprised it happened so soon. I thought it was
Yeah,
like I didn't expect it to happen the very next instant because they took it's like 6 episodes to pay off the Shireen thing. But I guess it didn't surprise me. They were just quick on the intake.
yeah, yeah.
uh, cool. So, is there anything else on Dorne you want to talk about?
No, I'm done with Dorne.
Done with Dorne.
Done with Dorne.
All right, cool. So, I want to go to Meereen now, and what I was thinking about Meereen is, well, I'll bring up again the prediction I made that Daenerys would leave to Westeros in this episode, and of course that was dead wrong. That was a totally wrong prediction. However, I'm even going to go a step further away from that because last week I said I felt she was definitely going to leave to Westeros by the beginning of season 6. I'm actually thinking of pushing that back to at least mid, possibly even late season 6. With her.
And I had said before I thought she was going to set foot in Westeros in season 6. I'm not even sure if that's the case, but I think she'll leave for Westeros by the end of season 6.
Yeah.
But setting foot in it, I don't know if that's going to happen in season 6.
Because I got the sense from this episode that they are setting up for big happenings in Meereen with Tyrion. Like I said in my prediction, I think that Tyrion is going to really take care of the Sons of the Harpy situation with Varys' help. Varys is going to bring his spies because they were sort of. I felt that they were setting up for that in this episode because it was sort of saying this is what you need to do. You need to apply pressure. So Tyrion's going to work his political magic with Varys' help that Daenerys wasn't capable of doing before.
I think so. So Tyrion is essentially taking the place of Barristan the Bold from the books, but as we've discussed before, there's probably not going to be like a battle per se. But I think I said this before. I think there's going to be something. The Sons of Harpy is not going to be resolved after this season. So there's going to be something in the place of the battle if it's not a battle.
Yeah, I think they're going with a political intrigue as opposed to a battle, and I'm fine with that. I mean, so it seems like that, like the Tyrion, Grey Worm, Melisandre trio is going to be the replacement for for Barristan. Like Grey Worm's going to handle the military side of thing, and Tyrion's going to handle the brains of the thing. And
yeah, yes. And by the way, I liked your theory that Grey Worm and Melisandre would be the permanent king and queen once Dany left, because I was wondering, what if she leaves, what's going to happen to Meereen? So that would make sense. The only question I would have about that then is, where's the Unsullied go? Because she kind of needs the Unsullied for Westeros, but they probably might still need the Unsullied in Meereen too.
See, that's a good point, and I had several theories on that, or two different theories, and maybe it could possibly be a mix between the two. Is that one is that she takes most of the Unsullied with her and leaves Grey Worm with enough to manage the city once, because Tyrion will get it all under control, so it will just be normal peacekeeping and won't having to deal with terrorism and stuff like that. So they won't need as much anymore, or possibly the Unsullied stay and the Dothraki take their place, and she manages to woo the Dothraki and gets this huge horde of Dothrakis to go to Westeros instead.
Yeah, I would say your first scenario is probably more likely to me.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, it would be kind of cool if the Dothraki did actually end up fighting for Daenerys, because that's what was set up in season 1, that they were going to fight for Viserys.
Yeah, so, well,
it'd be kind of cool, but yeah, I kind of don't see the Dothraki, crossing the Daenerys.
I think this is where it's leading, because in particular, there's a line in season 3 when Daenerys is on their way to Astapor talking to Jorah, and she's saying, I'll be a true Khaleesi, and he's like, you're not going to be a true Khaleesi until you show strength and respect, and you'll have a real Khalasar. To me, that was sort of the
that doesn't mean they're going to Westeros.
That was the Chekhov's inspiration.
To me, that could easily just mean that she takes control of the Khalasar. She uses them for her own purposes, and things go, and she uses them to take back Meereen or something like that. Doesn't necessarily mean they go to Westeros.
Maybe it's swapped. Maybe she takes the Unsullied with her, and the Dothraki stay in Police Meereen.
Which would be unusual for them to
do. Yeah, that would be really weird. But I don't know. I just think it would be like a huge, because Daenerys her whole thing is to make huge steps and do what no one did before, and getting the Dothraki to cross the Narrow Sea seems like that's something that they might have her do, because she does these huge things. And I personally think the most likely possibility out of the two I gave was a mix between the two, that she takes some Unsullied with her and the Dothraki.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's interesting. I guess we'll see. But I do think that she's going to, one way or the other, come out on top and be in charge of this Khalasar. I think that's the end game for this storyline with her and the Dothraki, whether or not they go to Westeros.
Yeah, and again, I think this isn't going to happen right away. I think it's going to be, they're playing it off as going to be really rough, and it's going to be an issue for her. Now,
I agree.
I'm trying to remember that in the books, if I recall correctly, in the scene where she encounters the Dothraki, I think, if I remember correctly, Drogon was right next to her when they were riding around here.
I don't think that's true, but I could be wrong.
I could be wrong. I don't remember very, very clearly. I'm sure someone's gonna correct us in the
I don't recall that was the case. The Drogon was there. because then it's just kind of like, oh, well, Drogon's there, so what's the big deal? I think I remember her. I remember feeling like she's in danger.
Oh, really? Because I remember thinking I got the feeling that she wasn't, but maybe I just wasn't reading it into the details or not. Maybe because I do that a lot with books. Sometimes I skim over and I miss important details, so I could see that. But the impression I got was that she wasn't in danger. That she was going to. I actually remember thinking that she was going to impress the Dothraki with her dragon, and they were going to be impressed by her dragon.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I don't I don't think that was the case, but we'll find out. Somebody will comment.
But that still might happen in the show next year. There's still
Yeah.
Drogon eventually might come, and they'll just be wooed by her and be like, "Oh, you're the mother of dragons." So I want to get back to the question of what happens to the other two dragons who are still locked up, and I want to declare a bit of a small victory here that that I predicted they'd still be locked up until season 6, like way back when. but
Yeah, and which I thought was not good storytelling. I think you had Chekhov's locked dragons. I think you had to have them released, and the fact that they're still locked up and they're just kind of forgotten about. Yeah, I don't like that. I think that they should have been released this season.
I'm fine with it. They touched in with them, and they had them eat some people alive, and that's I think that's good enough
Yeah,
for the season. But just as long they need to touch on it in season 6. Hopefully, like earlier the better.
they need to be released in season 6.
In fact, I'm kind of going back to my harpies theory that part of like when Tyrion's trying to sort shit out, they end up breaking in there and trying to kill them, and ended up setting them free instead.
Yeah, it could also be that Tyrion comes up with some half-baked idea where they're gonna somehow release the dragons themselves. Uh,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I don't know. I mean,
that's
yeah, but they gotta be released in season 6.
yeah. Yeah. And so it turns out we're both wrong about Grey Worm because he was like at the top of both of our lists for to be killed, but it looks like that's not the case. That they're keeping the Grey Worm Melisandre power thing going.
Yeah,
Uh, I think like if my theory turns out to be correct, then that would be why. I think, and the fact that he's still alive makes me gives more credence to that theory. I reckon.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So let's get into Varys. All right.
Okay,
Because,
let's do Varys, and then I want to talk briefly about Daario
okay, right. Okay.
before we leave Marine.
All right, sure. So, uh, okay. So I know from your video, you were just as disappointed as I was that Varys showed up in Marine because we both predicted that he wouldn't show up. It's not that we were wrong, so we were bitter that we got our predictions wrong. It's that we wanted we wanted to see Duran's master plan, Varys be involved, or him kill Pycelle and Kevin. I'll get more into that later on, but to have him show up in Marine, I mean. I guess he's going to be there to help Tyrion along in season 6, so that would be good. Before this episode, it was kind of like, I agree with what you said. Why are they holding off on Varys all season if all he's going to do is pop up? It seemed like it was a way he was wasted this season.
Yeah, if that's all he was going to do, they might as well have had him go with Tyrion and Jorah, or maybe it would be weird to have him involved in the slave scene, but he could be following them or something. I don't know. Like, just for him to disappear mysteriously and then pop up in Marine, like, what's the point?
Yeah, and I thought that it would make it all worthwhile if he revealed to Tyrion that Duran wants an alliance with Daenerys. That was the part of if Duran's master plan was revealed through Varys. I would have been like, I would have been satisfied. That would have been a good use of Varys.
Yeah, but I still would have wanted to see them go back to Duran then. Like, just to hear. It wouldn't be. It would be better than what they did, but just to
Yeah.
hear it secondhand from Varys would not have been as satisfying as hearing it from Duran himself. But it would have been better than what they did.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with that. Although I think that I would be happy getting back to Duran in season 6. Like it's as long as we got this Varys in season 5. But yeah. So what did you want to talk about with Daario?
Yeah, I just wanted to. I think you agree with me because you liked a comment that I wrote, but some a couple of different people on my wrote on my channel, in the comments that that they thought Daario was deceiving uh, Jorah, and that he just wants to kill Jorah, and that's why he came up with this plan. And in fact, one person said that, "Oh, come on, it's obvious." And I could not disagree more. I mean, I think, in fact, the opposite is obvious. There is not a shred of evidence that Daario would behave in that manner. There is nothing from Daario's behavior that portrays him as anything but completely loyal to Daenerys. And then he would suddenly decide he wants to kill Jorah would not make a bit of sense. And so I would say that not only is it not obvious, but it doesn't make any sense, in my opinion. I think Daario is truthful in what he says, and I think you can take him at face value. Is that kind of what you're thinking as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely and totally agree with you, which is why I plus made a plus thumbs up that comment because I thought you were dead on right. Like it's just ridiculous. He's not going to kill Jorah.
Yeah, there would be, if he did, it would be like, where did that come from? There's nothing that's led up to that at all. There's nothing about his character that says that he would do something like that. I thought he came up with a legitimately good plan, and that they're going to follow through with.
In fact, I thought Dario was being a bit out of character there when he was like bossing people around. I was thinking, who put this guy in charge?
Right. Yeah, except that they didn't necessarily have to listen to him. They could have. It was such a good idea that they all went along with it, but they could have said, "No, you're wrong." But he made so much sense that they were like, and it is kind of out of character for him to make that much sense.
Yeah.
But he made so much sense that nobody could really argue with that. But he wasn't really in charge. If they wanted to disagree with him, they could have disagreed with him. He can't really boss them around when it comes down to it.
And I was also not that thrilled about the bickering between Jorah and Tyrion because they were getting along before, and now they're like, "Ooh, blah blah. If I kill you, your eyes will be open." I'm like, "Okay, that's enough of that. We don't need it anymore."
Yeah, yeah. Jorah seems to be getting entitled all of a sudden now that it's back in Daenerys' favor. Like, well, I don't need you anymore. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so do we want to touch really briefly on the his star conversation from last week?
No, I think I admitted in my video I was wrong. I still think it could come out he was involved because of Chekhov's tardiness. But I don't know. I don't have anything else to say.
Well, I just want to bring up the point because a commenter made a comment on our discussion video last week that I totally agreed with. And I think that was actually a good point. And that was probably my initial reaction when I first saw the tardiness scene was it's a red herring. That it's in there to fake you out, to make you think that Hizdar is involved. And that's what I'm sticking with. I think that's the case.
Well, that would be dumb. But we'll see next season if that comes into play.
Well, if Dorne has proved anything, it's that the show's not beyond doing things that are dumb.
It is true. It is true, unfortunately.
Okay, so let's move on over to King's Landing, where we get this Walk of Shame scene. Now, I got a confession to make, and this is something I haven't really spoken out loud before because it's not that big of a deal to me, but the Walk of Shame has always been presented as one of the iconic moments of the books, and there's been a lot of hype, a lot of thing over, oh, the Walk of Shame is going to happen, it's going to be so awesome. But me personally, I never stated this out loud before. I wasn't that all about the Walk of Shame. Like, I didn't think it sucked, but when I read it in the books, I'm like, okay, Walk of Shame, whatever. It didn't strike me as this epic scene. And seeing it in the show, I feel the same way. But I have a feeling this might be the other scene you were talking about that you liked better than I did. So
yeah, in fact, because I kind of came around a little bit on the Stannis dying thing, that I think, yeah, he probably is dead. I would name this as the biggest point of disagreement between us because I really disagree with your assessment of it. And it's not that it was, this epic thing. It was just huge for this particular character. And in a story that is all about this character, which Feast for Crows was featured her heavily, as season 5 was a big Cersei season. In fact, if you're just going to push me right off the top of my head to say who my favorite story arc was of the season, I think it was Cersei. And this is just for that character. It was a huge character scene, and you thought that they, it took too long. It went on for too long. You also seem to have some sort of delusion that they might go back to Dorne, which I had no delusions that they were going to go back to Dorne. Like, I knew they were going to do the Walk of Shame and the Wall, and that'll be it. And I thought every second of that Walk of Shame was essential for to make the scene powerful, to make it powerful for that character. Every spit, everything thrown at her, every shout at her, every naked dude who's trying to attack her, all of that was necessary, and didn't seem like it went on that long to me. And I also thought, the whole point was when they show over the overview, she can see how far the Red Keep was. Like, this is long ways away. It needed to be, and I thought it was perfect. I thought it was beautifully done, and they shouldn't have cut out a second. And that's my opinion. It obviously was the opposite of what you said, because
Well,
it should have been shorter.
I'll agree with what you said that this is probably the biggest disagreement we have, maybe about the whole season, because I totally disagree. Feel very strongly that this was way too long and that we didn't need this. I mean, I think they drove the point. It was like they were sledgehammering the point. It's like, yes, we get it. It's like we don't need to see all, especially the bathing and the cutting the hair. That was, to me, that was just like, they could have fit, even if they did it before this scene, they could have fit more resolutions that we actually needed rather than to spend too much time on this. And to me, maybe I'm sure it has something to do with, I don't see it as that big of a deal as you do. And just to give my overall feelings of King's Landing, for me, the storyline fizzled out after episode 7. Once we stopped seeing Marjorie and Tommen, those were my biggest ends. And Lady Olenna and Littlefinger, once it was completely focused on Cersei, it's still good, but it wasn't as good, and it sort of lost me a bit.
Yeah, and that was my biggest problem with King's Landing. I didn't actually mention it in my video when I was talking about King's Landing, but I mentioned it at the beginning when I did my overview. Like, what the hell happened to Loras and Marjorie? Like, did they also get to do a walk of shame? Did they also confess? We got nothing. And Littlefinger, such a major character, to just disappear and not have any impact the last couple episodes. Uh, Tom, and you mentioned as well, he was mentioned in episode 8, I believe that was, but we haven't seen him. Marjorie and Loras haven't even been mentioned since episode 7, nor has Littlefinger. So that's probably my biggest complaint about the King's Landing, is the lack of those characters. But what they did with Cersei was perfect. They needed to do it that way. In fact, I would have been the exact opposite. If they had done it the way you had done it, I would have been like, that sucks. Like, what was this? I would have been really pissed off if they had
Really? Even if it was just like,
shortchanged that.
even
If
if
they
it
had,
was just like a minute shorter, you would have thought it would have been shortchanged.
it would have been shortchanged. They needed to do it the way that they did it. And I don't think it was. It didn't feel like it was as long as you seem to think it was. It didn't feel like it was going on. I thought it was. I was riveted at every step of the way, and it didn't seem like it went on for that long to me. And I thought that the they needed to stress how long she had to walk through the city. It was very important, and it was made it very powerful. And yeah, I would have been annoyed if they had shortchanged that scene. I thought that it was perfect. It was better than I could have expected.
I would have been much happier if they if they had, it was just beating a dead horse in my opinion. But anyway, I don't want to do the same thing now. But what I will agree with you on is that it was necessary for Cersei's arc, and it was an awesome sort of to see the walk of shame and to see how defeated she was, and then at the end to have her meet Robert Strong, and then you get that look like she's gonna get her fucking revenge. It was great, but I just don't see why we needed to see like 10 minutes of it. I think both times I watched the show, I thought, okay, come on, let's move along.
And then that's the other. Well, that's I guess we should go and time it. It didn't seem like 10 minutes to me. It didn't seem like it was that long. So I guess we'll need to go back and time it and see how long it
Well,
actually was. 'Cause it felt
I'm counting from the start of Cersei talking to the High Sparrow to when she ends up in the Red Keep. So not just the Walkers.
oh,
Because that's
oh
even the Sparrow thing seemed to drag out for too long. I was like, all
yeah.
right.
No, I don't. I don't agree with that at all. I thought they did a fantastic job with all of that. I don't have any problem with it. The only problem I have is who was not in the show, which I mentioned earlier.
One, they would have had time for it if they shortened. But anyway, I, I think we'll just have to agree to disagree on this one. But let's talk about the scene that we didn't get. Another scene that we didn't get was the Pycelle's still alive.
I know. Yeah.
Like, I don't,
Yeah. That.
Kevin Schmevin, who cares about him? But Pycelle is still alive.
Though to be fair, it would have been weird if they killed him off because he was hardly in the season. Like it wouldn't have had as much of an impact as it had in the books.
Yeah, I can
Because he
kind
was
of.
a much bigger player in the books than he was this season.
Yeah,
So
he's been in previous seasons more than he has in this season.
yeah, and that Feast for Crows storyline, he was a big player. Um, in this, he was hardly in it. So I can kind of see, why, but still, I want him to die.
Yeah.
So I hate that character. So yeah, it was disappointing. And yeah, that's what we were saying about Varys just popping up in Meereen. Really, I mean, at least go to Dorne or something. Just popping up. That was so boring. He's just
I
in
know.
Meereen.
I mean, it might be good for next season, but it's not good for this episode.
And if Varys isn't going to kill them, then Littlefinger should have done it. That
Exactly.
would have that would have been the perfect way to bring Littlefinger back and go.
Exactly. The chaos is Atlantic, and that would make sense because I can see why they might be delaying it because Aegon's not there, and that was your whole because your original prediction is it wouldn't happen because the Aegon thing's not there, and so maybe they're pushing it back and waiting until Dany actually is in Westeros to do this and to get us to know Kevin a bit better before giving him the stabby stab. But they could have just done it, just substitute Varys from Littlefinger, and but
Yeah, yeah. Well, I hope it happens still, but it's delayed. And this, by the way, I think is the biggest reason why if you hadn't read the books and you decided you go ahead and listen to this anyway, this would probably be the biggest spoiler that you would get is that Pycelle gets killed in the books, and it still could happen in the show, and I'm still hoping it does.
yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. So what do we think about Robert Strong? I mean, obviously, I mean, he didn't say his name in the show, but it's the same guy. I was a bit disappointed that they didn't because he's like, let me introduce you to the newest. I'm like, say his name.
Yeah, they've been doing that a lot this season, leaving out people's names for no reason. Like Loboda, the wildling, we got his name off screen.
Yeah,
Um, And then I guess that other chick, she was named off screen, but I forget what her name
yeah.
is, the wildling chieftain lady. Um,
Oh, and the
and I can't,
credits it just said Wildling Chieftain.
yeah, but I heard somebody else in some article or something give her a name.
Really? Oh.
Yeah, and maybe they made it up. I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
Well, then there's the
but
waif. We never got her
the
name.
waif, we never
Yeah.
got her name. It's weird how they've been doing that this season, just not giving people names. So it's fitting with the pattern that they've had all season, but there's no reason for it. Like, why not just say that's Robert Strong?
Yeah, and this case is worse because he's introducing him. That's the perfect way to get someone's name.
Yeah.
And I was a bit afraid to talk about this in my spoiler-free video about the why Robert Strong is a Kingsguard because I wonder if that's going to be a factor in the show because so far, like in the books, they made a huge deal out of making it so Cersei had to have a Kingsguard be her champion for trial by combat, and that's why they had to make him a Kingsguard so he could be her champion. And of course, the show hasn't even touched on the possibility of trial by combat, and maybe they're saving it for a big, like they did with Tyrion's trial. They saved it for this big, shocking. I demand a trial by combat. And if they're doing that, that's fine. I think as long as it works out, but yeah, it makes me wonder though if they're gonna bother with that whole you need to be a Kingsguard thing because in the book we actually know who the Kingsguards are, and in the show they're just generic extras.
Yeah, other than Jamie.
Yeah.
And Marin Trant, who is
Yeah.
no longer. So, um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of was getting the impression from the show that he's just gonna, they're gonna use him to like strike back against the Faith Militant. Where he's like, well, he's got to get rid of all the enemies of the Brown. That's kind of what I got from that, and rather than there being a trial by combat, that they're just going to say, "Fuck you! There is no trial. She's the queen. This is the king, and we're gonna, and we're gonna insert our force on you now, and we're gonna, we're not gonna listen to anything you say anymore." So that's, that may not be the case, but the way that they presented it, that's the impression I was getting.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that as well. I also thinking about that possibility. But the one thing that sort of makes me question it is Cersei's no longer in charge. Kevin is in charge. So it depends on whether or not he'd be on board with full on, unless like Cersei just used Robert Strong and goes like guerrilla tactics and Sons of the Harpy on the Ice Bear.
Well, I don't think Kevin Lannister is probably going to be all that happy, and I don't think he was either, with the Faith Militant having so much power. So I think he might be like, well, this first things first, we need to do something about this High Sparrow. That it's all your. He'll be like, Cersei, you fucked up. Step aside. Let me take care of your problem that you created. But he will still view it as a problem.
Yeah. Well, and
needs to be dealt with.
that is another scene I was disappointed that we didn't get in this episode. Was I wanted to see that conversation between Kevin and Cersei, like we got in the books, where Kevin outlines that Cersei. I think that would give the Walk of Shame an explanation point if he outlined like he did in the books, and you're done. You can never rule anything. Nobody's going to trust you after this.
Yeah, and I think that they could have done that. They could have slipped that in there. Because last year they had the finale was like 75 minutes or something. They could just tag. They don't need to cut anything out. They just tag on a couple extra minutes for that. But
yeah, that's true. That is true. Yeah, I think that's the main problem I had with this episode as a whole, is that it left at too many cliffhangers. Even some of the cliffhangers that were exactly the same cliffhanger we got in the book, it's still like, because it's not usually Game of Thrones style to leave a season finale with so many cliffhangers.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just think, I don't know how they could have done it better, but I just feel like, an entirely different restructuring of the pacing of this season might have been in order, because I didn't. I said in my overview of my video that I just felt like they were trying to cram too much into one episode. Even if they did make it a few minutes longer, they left too much for it, and then so a lot of things ended up feeling unresolved. Some things felt like, there were cliffhangers that maybe they didn't need to have as cliffhangers. I felt like maybe somehow if they could have wrapped up, let's say, Braavos last week or something, or wrapped up Dorne last week, which would have called for an entire restructuring of how they paced everything to fit all that in, but and allow us to spend more time with fewer storylines, and maybe we could have gotten farther, gotten some resolution and things. I don't know how they could have been done, and I'm not a writer, but I'm not a writer for the show, but I just think they left too much for us in the finale, so they were setting up to have too many cliffhangers and too many unresolved things.
Yeah, and don't have so much take place off screen. That's the other thing, and don't have unnecessary ambiguous endings like the Stannis thing. If your intention was to have him be killed, show him be killed.
Yeah. I don't know. We may or may not do a video that talks about season 5 in review, but just your quick thoughts. Where do you think you're going to rank, or do you want to save this for when you do your ranking videos? But I don't know. I want to just say that my initial impression is that I think of season 5 as the worst season of Game of Thrones so far. But the worst season of Game of Thrones is like a gazillion billion times better than the top 50 episodes of Friends all combined and put together. It's still incredible TV, but relative to the other seasons, this is my initial impression. I'm probably gonna think on this more and do a ranking of the seasons and go back, and I may change that But season 5 will definitely not be one of my top 2,
See,
or probably
I
not in my top 3.
I watched the 4 seasons right before season 5, which is why I feel pretty confident on doing rankings. Although maybe I should let season 5 sit a bit longer, but I think since I've watched these episodes so many times doing these reviews and watching a billion other reviews, I think I got a pretty good handle on season 5. And I am ready to give a bit of a preview on my season ranking video. Is that season 5 rank third for me?
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, if I thought about it more, it could move up to as high as third, maybe. If I really put some, I'm just giving my, and it probably has a lot to do with my really strong feelings of disappointment from the finale. That that's where so I felt like so many storylines were failures, like you did too. When there's so many storylines that are failures, it's hard for me to say how's that one of the top 3 best seasons with so many failed storylines.
Well, I think one of the main differences between us will be our opinion of episode 9 because I liked it way better than you did. So, or correct me if I'm wrong. I liked it way better.
Well, I like that one scene, I think, as much as you did. But if you take the whole, the Marine segment, I think I liked
Yeah,
at least close to as much as you did. We
yeah,
both liked it quite a lot. But looking at the episode as a whole, eh, I mean, it
yeah,
wasn't that. That's probably where our difference is. Not in the Marine scene, but the rest of the stuff in that episode
yeah. But like I said,
doesn't make that a great episode.
I'm even considering it for my number one episode of the entire series. So that's how much. So I think I did like that episode way better than you. For me, that lifts season 5 up.
Yeah.
That's probably why I have a higher opinion of
Way
season
better than
5.
me, and I think everybody else, well, at least everybody else that I've ever heard give an opinion. I mean, because
Well,
there are a lot of people who dislike that episode quite a
yeah,
lot.
I
So
well, to be fair,
I haven't heard anybody else besides you who
I
really
haven't
likes the
heard
episode as much as you did.
another reviewer say that, but I've seen many comments that they're ready to say right now is the best episode of the series. Like I'm still considering it.
Of episode 9,
Yeah,
I haven't heard anybody say that about episode 9.
I've seen plenty of
Episode 8,
comments about that.
episode 8, I have.
Well, yeah,
Uh,
episode 8, yes, that was the unanimous. There's very little dissension there.
Well, I'll give a little bit of preview. When I come back from my camping trip that I'm going on, at some point within the next couple weeks, I'm going to do some season 5 reviews, and one of them is going to be a top 10. And for the season, episode 9 will be up there pretty high. But will it be number 2? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. But
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, well, just to let people know, I'll probably be doing my top 10 episodes within my season 5 overall review. So if you can just watch that for that. But yeah, so we're about ready to wrap up now.
Yeah, do we want to talk about the Q&A a little bit?
Yeah. Let's talk about the Q&A because obviously we didn't do one this week, so we're going to do a whole separate video. Hopefully, it can be an hour long, maybe something like that, maybe shorter, depending on how many questions we get. Maybe longer. Who knows? So we're trying to. If you want to send in your questions and just send in as much as you can, maybe send some on Akton Tamko's channel, so I don't have all the questions.
Yeah, because I did kind of say in my video, just hold off on your questions for now. So I'm probably not going to get any questions on my video because of that. But if you want to go ahead and leave some on my channel now, you can do that on my episode 10 review. You can leave it on the Enchantment of Eternity episode 10 review, and you can leave it on this video. The comments of this video as well. And remember the rules, write Q&A very clearly, and it will not be published. You won't see it published. We're going to delete the comment and save the question for our video. We'll read it on our video. And please please make sure that you have at least watched both of our individual videos and this discussion video for episode 10. I mean, I understand if you didn't watch every single one of our videos that we've done, but don't ask questions that we just talked about in this video.
Yeah. Yeah.
Please, which it's not a big deal because we just won't ask them. But if you would like your question to be asked, you have a better shot, let's say, if you have actually watched our videos and know what we already have covered and what we haven't covered. Because if you ask something we've already talked about, your question won't be asked on our video.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I already have a number of questions waiting. You don't have any, do you?
I don't have any because I
Yeah.
didn't say to put any questions.
So, yeah, I wouldn't mind more. You go ahead and give me more, but maybe give Akton Tamko some as well. All right, cool.
We'll even it out either way.
Yeah.
We'll make it work.
Yeah, we'll make it work. Okay, so I think that wraps up our discussion video. Make sure you subscribe to both our channels to keep up, because we still, even though season's 5 over, we both have our plans in the works for more season 5 videos and more Game of Thrones videos over the break, I'm assuming.
I'm probably going to take a little bit of a break after I cover season 5 before I start jumping into season 6. But yeah, there will be stuff all year round coming from Akton Tamko's channel on Game of Thrones.
Yeah, and I talked a bit on my individual review of my plans, so I'm going to keep going all through the break. So yeah, make sure you subscribe to both channels, keep up with that, and thanks a lot for watching.